I'm Chef Joe, and this is how to cook pot roast. I'm a Midwestern guy, and pot roast is one of the all-time favorite comfort foods. Now granted, pot roast isn't a type of meal that you're going to come home from work and pop in the oven and it'll be ready in an hour. It takes some time to prepare, but that time is worth the wait. The type of meat that we're going to use to cook pot roast is either a chuck roast, shoulder roast, or brisket. I'm going to be using a chuck roast, a boneless chuck roast. I don't buy bone-in chuck roast for preparing pot roast because at over $3 a pound, I don't want to be spending that money on a bone. I want to be spending it on the meat. Now before we get into cooking, we're going to have to season and treat our chuck roast. So I'm going to show you how to do that. To season our pot roast, we're going to need a little bit of olive oil or canola oil if you prefer, and my beef roast seasoning blends. This seasoning blend will add a very distinctive, robust flavor to our pot roast. It's also good to use on any type of beef roast, even steaks and some pork roast too. Go to my website at cookingedu.com and click on the Spice Store link to purchase my special blend of beef roast seasonings. Now we don't need to salt and pepper the chuck roast because of the seasoning blend. So I'm going to put a little bit of olive oil on here and just work it into the meat, spread it all over, and we want to do both sides. You know, it's a good practice to let the chuck roast sit unrefrigerated for about an hour, because we're going to be using so low of cooking temperatures that it'll kind of already be at a good level to start cooking with. Now we're going to add our seasoning blend, and this is not a rub. This is a seasoning blend, so we really don't want to rub this in. We just want to kind of smooth it in and layer it all over. Let's do the other side. And now we're ready to start cooking our pot roast. I'm using a cast iron crock pot because this will eventually be going into the oven for about 3 to 4 hours. The method of cooking we're using is called moist heat cooking. We're going to be braising, which means that we're going to sear the meat, then we're going to add a little liquid, then we're going to put it in the oven and let it cook for, like I said, 3 to 4 hours at a very low temperature. So my pot is nice and hot. I'm going to add, I put a little oil in here, and I'm going to add my chuck. We're just going to let that brown up and sear up on the first side. Then we're going to flip our chuck roast over and continue with searing the second side. Now that the second side is seared and nice and crusty, I'm going to remove the pot roast to a plate and put it aside. And I'm going to add to the pot some mirepoix. And mirepoix is diced carrots, diced celery, and onion. And this is going to give it another flavor enhancement. Now we're just going to let that saute a bit. That's very good. Now I'm going to return the chuck roast to the pan right on top of the mirepoix. Now to this I'm going to add a little bit of fresh beef stock. You can also add wine if you wish. Some people add a little bit of beer. And I'm also going to add a can of diced tomatoes. Then I'm going to put the lid on, and we're going to place it into the oven. Now I'm going to cook our pot roast at 300 degrees for about 15 minutes. Then I'm going to bring the temperature down to 225 degrees, and I'm going to let it cook for about 3.5 hours. On the last 45 minutes of the cooking cycle, I'm going to add some carrots and some potatoes, and then cook it for that additional 45 minutes. 3.5 hours later, and our pot roast is ready. Now remember to put in your carrots and your potatoes about 1 hour to 45 minutes during the last cooking cycle. Just put them in the pot and let them cook in the juices of the pot roast. But you can see how nice and tender the meat just falls away. Until we meet again, I'm Chef Joe. Treat yourself good. Eat good. How to Cook is brought to you by CookingEDU.com.